Heartbreak and Reflection, uncovering betrayal on our 10th wedding anniversary. Yesterday marked our 10-year wedding anniversary. Megan and I, both 35, have been married for a decade. Over the past few months, she's been deep in a significant work project. The past 4 weeks, in particular, have been intense, with her putting in extra hours, arriving early, and staying late to meet her deadline. This project could make or break her career. I work in construction, where our schedule is heavily influenced by the weather. When it rains, we miss time. So, on clear days, we push hard. 12-hour days, sometimes longer. If it's raining when I wake up, I don't go in. And some days, we're sent home if the weather turns, as it's too risky to continue. I usually hit the gym for an hour or two on those days. This past Thursday, we started work at 6 a.m. But mid-morning, the rain came down hard, and we got sent home. As usual, I headed to the gym, but cut my workout short, deciding to surprise Megan downtown with some flowers and hopefully make dinner plans. We hadn't seen much of each other that week, with me going to bed around 9 p.m. while she was still at work, having called earlier to say she'd be late again. It wasn't unusual for this past month. I grabbed some flowers and arrived at her building around 12:30. Nicole, the receptionist, was at her desk. I mentioned I'd gotten there later than planned and asked if she could place the flowers on Megan's desk. Nicole suggested I drop them off myself, saying, "I don't think they've gone to lunch yet." She buzzed me through to the offices, which were deserted. I made my way to Megan's office, the door closed. Normally, I'd just walk in unless Nicole mentioned she was in a meeting. I opened the door, and there he was, some guy standing behind her, nuzzling her neck, while she reached back, her hand over his head. She was giggling in that way only she can, saying, "We've got to get this done." The sight knocked the wind out of me. I slammed the flowers on her desk, muttered, "Happy anniversary," and walked out. I didn't hear her response, just walked past Nicole, said goodbye, and left. I made it to the elevators, then out of the building, before my phone started ringing. I cried all the way home, pulled into the garage, grabbed my camping gear from the rafters and took off. I drove for about 2 hours to a state park. I had no idea what I was doing. I just needed to escape. I hiked a trail we'd walked before, a 3-hour hike trying to clear my head. I don't drink much, so I had no alcohol with me. I just sat there, thinking. Looking back, I'm grateful I was in such a rush that I didn't bring my .45 caliber handgun, which I normally take camping. We have black bears in the area. They usually scare off but can get aggressive if they're hungry or have cubs. Given how I was feeling, I might have done something reckless. My phone was blowing up with calls from Megan, so I turned it off. I eventually left the park to get reception and turned my phone back on, seeing that my good friend had called. I returned his call, and he said Megan had reached out to him, worried I might do something stupid. We talked for a bit, and I told him I needed to sort through this on my own and would catch up with him on Friday. As I tried to process everything, I reflected on our marriage from the beginning, wondering what I'd missed. We came from completely different backgrounds. My grandfather and mom raised me, teaching me about life. My grandpa had a saying for everything, and he used to tell me that marriage would be the hardest job I'd ever have, something that needed daily effort. God, I miss him. We didn't have much, and I often overheard Mom and Grandpa discussing bills, but they worked hard, and my brother and I never felt we were missing out on anything. Megan, on the other hand, was born into comfort, not overly rich, but definitely well off. She attended a great college, always had the latest fashion, and drove a new car, and she's stunning, an 11 out of 10. I used to joke with her about the silver spoon getting stuck in her throat when she'd cough. When we met, we clicked immediately and started dating. I couldn't believe someone like her would be with me. We dated for a while before she told me about her parents and their lifestyle. Our friends called us the model couple, thinking we were too good-looking not to be models. Our families, however, were more skeptical, worried that the economic differences between us would cause problems. Her dad and I eventually got along, but but it took some time for my mom to warm up. She graduated, got her first job, and we started planning our wedding. We made a pact to immerse ourselves in each other's worlds. She joined me for whitewater rafting while I went to the symphony with her. We tried ziplining, attended art openings. You name it, we did it. We agreed that we needed to embrace each other's interests. She genuinely enjoyed the physical activities, and I found myself liking the symphony and such. I even own 2 tuxes now. Looking back, I can't see any red flags. She left her first 2 jobs because men tried to get in her pants. They'd parade her in front of cameras for photo ops, invite her to conferences where other newbies weren't invited. At one conference dinner, a partner tried to get her drunk and then forced himself into her room that night. She quit. The same thing happened at her next job, so she left again. This third job, where some of the partners are women, doesn't have any of that nonsense, and she seemed really happy there. We seemed really happy. Now it's Friday, and I'm back home. I called her and asked where she was, still at work. In a smart-ass mood, I commented that our marriage seemed to be taking a back seat to her job. She replied that since I wouldn't talk to her, what else was she supposed to do? Fair enough. She said she'd be home in an hour, so I waited. I want to save our marriage. If I've fallen short somehow, I want to fix it. Of course, I want to ask why she did it, but I can't accept an "I don't know" as an answer. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My wife was with 32. Different men. Before we got married, now she has to agree to let me sleep with other women, or we're getting a divorce. My wife and I started dating back in high school, and even then, we were already dreaming about married life, talking about what we'd name our kids, where we'd live, all that stuff. We were even each other's firsts. When it was time to choose universities, I got accepted into the same one she had picked. But I also got offered a spot at one of the top universities in the world. Since we'd always planned for her to be a stay-at-home mom, we decided I should go to the better university to boost my future earning potential, even though it meant we'd be in a long-distance relationship. During my time at university, I did my best to visit her almost every weekend, and I honestly thought things between us were going great. Just last week, we were at a party with some mutual friends, reminiscing about the old days, when one of her friends casually mentioned how wild she was during university. At first, I almost didn't catch it, but when I looked over at my wife, her face had gone pale, and she was giving her friend a look that could kill. I decided not to confront her right then and there, or even on the drive home, but she could tell something was off by how I suddenly went quiet. Once we were home, I made sure our boys, who are 13 and 16, were asleep before I confronted her about what her friend had said. I told her that if I felt she was lying, I'd make her call that friend right then and there to talk about her university days while I listened. She hesitated a bit, but eventually she admitted that she was really into clubbing during university, and that it led to several hookups and even a few ongoing friends with benefits situations. She kept saying that she was just an immature kid back then, and that I shouldn't hold it against her. At that point, I was afraid I'd lose my temper, so I left the house and spent the night at a hotel. The whole night, she kept texting and calling, alternating between telling me she loves me and giving me every excuse under the sun. She kept insisting that it was no big deal and that things are different now because we're married. But for me, nothing has changed. The fact that we've been married for 18 years doesn't change the reality that she cheated. This whole time, I believed we shared something special, that we were each other's first and only. But now I see that it was all just a lie. I spent a few days really thinking it over, even went so far as to meet with one of my friends, who happens to be a divorce lawyer. Despite everything, I still love her and want to work things out, but I can't and won't stay in a marriage where I feel this way. Every time I look at her, I feel a wave of disgust. I feel like I waited for her, even though I had other options, while she made me the butt of a joke. So 2 days ago, I sat down with her at the table, pen and paper in hand. while our sons were with her parents. I told her to write down the names of the men she'd slept with and give me an estimate of how many times it happened. If she couldn't remember their names, I told her to just make some up. I warned her that if I ever found out she lied about the numbers, I would divorce her immediately, so she needed to be as accurate as possible. In the end, the total came out to about 27 men, with the number of encounters ranging from 1 to 32. Then, I told her that I do want to reconcile, but I have conditions. Since she seems to think that sleeping with others while in a committed relationship is perfectly fine, I told her I would be sleeping with 27 women, the same number of times she just admitted to, at times of my choosing without giving her a heads up. I made it clear this was non-negotiable for our reconciliation, and if she disagreed, she needed to tell me right then and there, or I would have my lawyer start drafting the divorce papers. At first, she just looked at me, bewildered, before she started shouting and crying, saying it's different now that we're married and that I would be cheating. I explained that since I was telling her in advance, it wasn't cheating, and if she agreed to this to save our marriage, I would take it as her consent. Since then, she's been trying everything to change my mind, crying day and night, having angry outbursts, offering me anything I want except for that. But nothing's going to make me budge. She either accepts it, or we go through with the divorce. I've given her until the end of this week, Friday, to make her decision. I know some people might think I'm overreacting, so let me address that right now. I'm not afraid of getting a divorce. I'm still young enough to meet someone new. Plus, I own a few businesses that put me in contact with some very savvy lawyers who help minimize my taxable income and make smart business decisions that, as a bonus, also protect most of my assets in a divorce. I'll pay more than what's necessary in child support to make sure my kids are well taken care of, but she'll be getting the bare minimum in alimony. In my view, I wouldn't have married her if I'd known she had cheated, so she shouldn't benefit from our marriage. Am I wrong for potentially throwing away an 18-year marriage over infidelity that happened before we tied the knot?